Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I'm AA Ron, and this is the Inclusive Dad Podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Danielle Sullivan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Why don't you just start us off by just telling me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Danielle. I'm in Colorado. We were just talking about that a little bit. We're just finally getting to be spring here. I'm a late identified autistic ADHD individual with a couple of other neurological differences. And I now work supporting other, mostly late identified neurodivergent adults, understand how to create lives that work for us as opposed to what the world expects from us or thinks it needs from us, and just working against ableism in that way. So you can find me at neurodiverging.com, and I have a podcast, the Neurodiverging Podcast. And that's me in a nutshell.
There you go. Thank you very much. What is your definition of inclusion?
Sure. I was thinking about this, and what it really comes down to for me is that psychological safety or emotional safety, that feeling that I can go into a space, any kind of space, and feel like I am allowed to talk. I'm allowed to behave the way that comes naturally to me, as long as I'm not harming others. That I am honored and respected as another human being. So inclusion to me is really about creating that safety for the people around us.
Yeah, I love that. Do you find that safety you're talking about in lots of places, or like not very many places, or how's it for you?
I've gotten better at recognizing what I can do for myself to make myself feel safer. But, in autism circles, we talk a lot about masking, this idea that we have to behave in a certain way to get other people to accept us. And
Right.
for autistic people, at least, that can be like we don't sim as much. We don't make noise or vocally exhibit our emotions as much. We sit still instead of like bouncing. Like I'm on a Pilates ball right now, and my instinct is to sort of bounce and regulate myself and get rid of energy. But for a professional meeting, I'm supposed to sit still and
Right.
not bounce. And so for me, part of feeling safe is assessing for myself, okay, actually, if I shook my hands and stimmed, or if I made a vocal trill, or if I bounced, is that person still going to treat me like an adult in a respectful manner? Or is that person going to start treating me like a little kid, or like somebody who doesn't know or can't make their
Right.
own decisions? So that's part of how I assess
Right.
if I feel safe and if I feel included. And I think I feel safe in a lot more places than many other people. I'm a white woman. I have a lot of privilege, but there's lots of places where you can't say make noise, even if it's quiet, or even just move your own body in a way that feels good without other people judging you. So
Yeah.
it doesn't happen as much as I'd like.
Yeah. So you said you were identified with autism in your 30s. So what
Yeah.
when you were growing up, like in school, did you have any like help in school, or how was that for you?
No, I was in the gifted classes in
Okay.
school for all the way up through high school. And then I got through college and my master's program undiagnosed. And part of it, I think, is that, I was born in 85. So autism at
Mhm.
that time was really thought of as like a little boy disease or a
Okay.
little boy issue. It was really thought of as a disease for a long time. Now we wouldn't obviously call it that because it's not. But at the time, it was really like girls don't have autism.
Sure.
And especially girls who like turn in their homework mostly on time and are in the gifted classes, they don't have autism. And so it wasn't really until I was old enough that one of my kiddos was diagnosed, and I started learning about how autism presents in women, especially adult women. And I was like,
Okay.
oh, there it is. But no, I don't know that anybody like me would have been caught in 85. I think you really
Yeah.
had to be quote unquote more severe. Whatever that means. You had to need more support. You needed to show your traits more openly.
Yeah.
You couldn't mask as well, right? And a lot of us mask really well, especially if you're a woman. Men mask too, but women are sort of trained to mask in certain ways socially in the U.S. And so a lot of us aren't caught until we have kids, and then our kids are caught. And I've met so many other people, men and women, all the way up to being grandmothers and grandparents who come to the realization that they have ADHD or they're autistic or they're bipolar or whatever else it is when a kiddo is caught in the school system usually.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
So you're saying like kind of how you caught it for yourself as you started looking into what there was, about your child or researching it more, and then you're like, hey,
Mhm.
this is some of this sounds like me. Is that what you mean?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That my child is a boy and he started showing traits around 2 or 3 pretty early. And I was like, I'm pretty sure this is autism, but I'm a researcher, so I wanted to like check.
Right.
And the more I read about it and looked at different understandings or ways to recognize it, the more I realized actually I have a lot of these traits too. They just weren't, maybe I don't show them as much.
Right.
And they weren't thought to be like, I'm trying to think of the word, like out there enough, like obvious enough to other people. Right. Like I internalized them. So I think this way, but do other people know I think that way? Like, so they wouldn't be able to catch it. Yeah.
Gotcha. You've mentioned the word masking a couple of times. I think I know what it means. Can you just explain in your words, like what you mean by masking and give some examples maybe?
Sure thing. So in the autism community, masking just refers to this, there's this idea that you have to behave a certain way in school or in your job in order to be accepted and for people to take you seriously. And when you're disabled or neurodivergent, you have to behave like a neurotypical, which is just the sort of standard brain, or an able-bodied person. You have to behave like someone who's not autistic. So that's masking, is I know I'm autistic, I have autistic traits and behaviors, but I'm going to pretend that I'm not, so that other people will take me seriously, or take me as a human, treat me respectfully. That's masking. And a lot of us just do it to fit in so that we can, make money at our jobs, get promoted, get our kids into the good schools, just get by, really. When you don't fit in, you're excluded from a lot socially. It's harder to make friends. It's harder to access, stuff in the community. It's harder to, get promoted at your job or get on the board or do any of the things you might want to do. Even just get hired, right? And so it's often sort of almost required that we mask, because masking is really hard. Like if you can imagine pretending to be a different person all day, like a lot of us can do it to some degree successfully, but it's hard, it's fatiguing, and it doesn't let us be authentic about who we really are. So it makes it harder for us to make like real friends, because we're pretending to be somebody else all the time. Yeah. And I think that masking, we use this word in autism, but I think a lot of disabled people probably have this similar kind of experience of having to pretend or feeling pressured to pretend in certain ways.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, is masking only limited to like people with disabilities then, or do you think like other people that aren't disabled also mask?
Yeah, for me, I tend to think that there's pressure from society, depending on your culture and where you live and your family of origin and all these things. You have pressures on how you behave, right? Yeah. Like in the US, for example, women are supposed to behave in a certain way and men are supposed to behave in a certain way. And when you don't behave that way, you're often punished by society, right? Like you're excluded. And so I think that there is pressure on everybody, and we decide how we handle that pressure. But I do think there's an additional pressure on neurodivergent people, because we have that invisible, like, people don't know I'm autistic unless I tell them, right? On the whole. And whenever you have an invisible illness or disability or neurodivergence, people tend to assume you're quote unquote normal until you show otherwise. And people can feel betrayed when they think if they assume that you're neurotypical and then you're not, they feel like you lied even though you didn't. And that's not necessarily my problem, but it makes it harder for me to live my life. And so I think a lot of people feel a lot of that pressure. I don't know if they mask specifically, because I do think masking, that there's components to it that are sort of specific to autism. But I'm sure there are similar experiences across. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. The reason I asked that is when you're talking, I mean, the part about us, having to hide who we truly are
Mhm.
in some situations,
Yeah.
some pieces of us. I mean, myself so I grew up Baptist.
Yeah.
I have tattoos.
Hmm.
So when I was growing up, tattoos, we shouldn't have tattoos on your
Yeah.
body for all those teachings. So I mean, still, I mean, I'm 47. If I go into a church, I normally cover up my arms because I just
Hmm.
feel it doesn't feel right to me just because of those teachings I was taught when I was younger. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was wondering. I mean, I'm not sure it's masking, but I know I was recognizing things in my own life where I am not my true self in certain situations just because of how people are going to react or take it. So that's why I was
Yeah.
kind of curious your opinion if that would be masking or if that's something similar but different, I guess.
I think that's really interesting. I think part of social justice work is that we want everybody to be able to live authentically,
Right.
in a non-judgmental way as much as possible. And so if you're in a space that's working towards equity for everybody, um, I think we're all working towards authenticity, whether
Right.
that's having tattoos in church or
Yeah.
being able to stim in a public place.
Yeah.
Um, I've heard the word camouflage thrown around a lot, in disability circles for people who are not autistic but are
Sure.
trying to fit in, right? And I wonder if maybe that's a better term. And I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people should use words that help them describe their experience. I don't know that it's
Yeah.
worth it to gatekeep this specific term.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think there's something to be said that all of us have ways that we're asked to behave by society.
Right.
And sometimes you go along with it because it's easier and you only have so much energy and capacity.
Yeah.
And sometimes you take a stand, right?
Yeah.
And you make a fuss about it. And it just depends. It's really particularly the individual and what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
That's awesome. That was a great conversation. Appreciate that.
I'm really glad.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in '77. You said you were born in '85. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't, part of my story is I don't remember any talk about disability. I mean, for sure not autism, any of that
Oh, yeah.
stuff when I was growing up, or never saw
Hmm.
anybody in a wheelchair, any of that stuff. So, my daughter was born, she's 22. All the disability related stuff was new to me. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I don't ever remember hearing, I mean, I'm older than you, so autism or any disability related
Yeah.
stuff talked about. So, and I mean, I mean, I don't think I have autism, but now we talk more about having, coping skills and stuff. And then I look
Hmm.
back, like I chewed on pencils and doodled in my notebooks. I mean, you kind of see things where like those are
Yeah.
coping skills, which we didn't call them that, but I
Hmm.
was figuring out ways to do stuff to keep myself regulated in
Yeah.
school. So it's interesting how different things we talk about or recognize and, is more mainstream than they were for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think we had, in my school, a special education classroom.
Yep.
And I know that we had some students with Down syndrome and with cerebral palsy, and you'd see them in the hallways, but they certainly weren't integrated into the larger classroom. Um, and I don't think I knew anything about autism
Hmm.
or ADHD except maybe the the Rain Man movie with Dustin Hoffman,
Yeah.
right? It was like kind of very stereotypical.
Right.
But and then maybe in my 20s, I bumped
Sure.
into like other autistic people, but it was really like smart white man who likes math kind of
Yep.
stereotypes. Um, and I really had to learn a lot when I had my kiddos. And before that, I was actually in religious studies. That's what I got my graduate degree in, um, and working on human rights in that capacity. And it is really interesting how much translates over in unexpected ways because a lot of folks in religion are looking for their authentic self too, right?
Right.
In the relationship with spirit, whatever that is.
Sure.
And so many disabled people are blocked from their authenticity by the world in various ways. And I really think it's all about just finding, well, what's your purpose? What are your values? What are your life goals? In whatever way you want to do that. It's so important.
Yeah, for sure. So what was it like for you when you were diagnosed with autism in 30s? Like, I mean, what did you like? How did you feel when you got the diagnosis?
I was so I self-diagnosed first and then kind of
Okay.
went and got a formal evaluation. So I was pretty sure. Like I would have
Yep.
heard them if they said no, obviously. But I was going to be really surprised if they said I wasn't autistic by that point, because at that point, my son had been diagnosed and I had researched for several years. I think the first feeling was really a big feeling of relief, because I say this a lot, but I often felt like I was a broken, quote unquote, normal human before I got my diagnosis, because I was trying to fit in and trying to mimic what I saw my peers doing. And it just was not, I was mostly not successful. And so it was always about me, like, I'm not working, I'm not right. And when I got the diagnosis, it was like, oh, you're not a broken neurotypical person, you're a correct autistic person, which was not a good way to think about it, but it was where I was at the time, right? That it gave me the space to recognize that it wasn't all my fault, like internally, it wasn't all me doing something wrong. It was, there are systems set up that support certain kinds of people and don't support me. And now that I know that, I can create my own system. So it gave me all this freedom to like do things differently that I didn't have before. And then the other predominating feeling was really one of grief, because, you know, you think you're somebody for 30 years. And then it wasn't like I changed who I was exactly, but I'd had all these experiences. How do I describe this? Through a certain lens. And then to find out that none of it was like right or correct. Like if I'd been diagnosed, I'll just say this, if I'd been diagnosed when I was 5 or 2 or 10 or 15, or even in graduate school, frankly, so many things would have been so much easier. Life was so hard because I didn't get any support for any of the things, because I thought they were all my fault, as opposed to there's reasons for this and I deserve access, right? So if I would have gotten diagnosed earlier, I really think a lot of my life would have been better. My mental health would have been better. My early kids' lives would have been better. Like many things could have been improved for a lot of people. And so it was really frustrating. And I felt really angry and sad to know that if I'd been caught earlier, I could have kind of foregone so much trauma. But also, like I was saying earlier, we didn't know what people like me looked like in '85. So like, you know, it's not like people could have caught me earlier, I don't think. I think it was just one of those things. The research hit right when I turned 30, and we suddenly had the capacity to diagnose people like me. Yeah. But a lot of sadness and also a lot of relief.
So once you kind of self-diagnosed or got the diagnosis formally, I mean, when you mentioned that to people in your life, what was their reaction? Did they say we knew, or were they surprised, or how did they react?
I think, well, at this time, one of my kids had already been diagnosed. So I think it was a little easier than if I had been the first person.
Sure.
Because it was kind of an accidental trickle of my kiddo got, and then me, and then one of my partners with ADHD, and then another kid with ADHD. So it was just like this knockdown domino effect of like, oh, wait, we're all like this. I do think I got a lot of pushback around people just not knowing what autism looks like. Like I would say, people think of autism as like the smart white boy, and aren't aware of like the diversity of how autism presents and what autistic people are like. And so I got a lot of like, oh, you're too smart. Oh, you're too put together. Like, oh, you're too organized. And those were all coping mechanisms, because I'm not inherently organized and I'm not inherently put together. And I speak academically because I'm not actually very good at speaking casually. I learned in school how to speak, and that's what I do. And then even when I'm trying to speak casually, I know that I kind of speak like a nerd, and I can't undo that. And so it was really funny, because like a lot of the things people put out as reasons I couldn't be autistic were actually like how you know I'm autistic if you know what autism looks like.
Sure.
So there was a lot of pushback, and it kind of sucked. And it was really frustrating, and I did lose some friends and family over it, unfortunately. But also, it made my life so much better to know that I can't really be, like, it was hard at the time, but I can't really be sad now that it happened. I'm very grateful because it's just improved things dramatically for me.
Yeah. So are you a nerd?
I am super a nerd. Yeah, I've always been super a nerd.
Do you play Magic the Gathering?
No, I have a lot of friends who do.
Okay.
One of my issues is executive dysfunction, and part of that is I have really poor working memory. So if I have the card and then I put the card down, and I can't see it anymore, I don't remember what that card was.
Oh, okay.
So I'm a gamer, but I have to pick games where the thing is right in front of me, because Otherwise, she'll
Yeah.
sweep me under the rug real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, I worked at I think I think 7 years ago, I started working at a residential mental health facility for
Mhm.
children. In the oldest boy dorm, all of them, well, not all of them, but a number of them were playing Magic the Gathering. So me and a few other coworkers started playing just
Mhm.
something we could relate to them and have fun. So I still play a little bit, but
Yeah,
not as much as I used to. But yeah, so that's my kind of one of my nerdy things. It's kind of
that's so
fun.
cool. I'm sorry I can't connect with you on that. I like watching people playing, but
Yeah,
I do the working memory thing is a real
yeah,
challenge to. I play a lot of board games and a lot
okay,
of online games, and it's a real challenge.
yeah.
It really has to be in front of me. Lately, I've been into Wingspan, and
Oh,
what else have I like a lot of those like they're like almost like security horror games where you're looking through the cameras and you're trying to spot the difference. It's like adult spot the
oh,
difference with like
sure.
a horror bent. I love those things. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for my partner and I, we played Wingspan one time at her friend's house.
mhm.
That's a pretty fun game.
I love
I enjoyed it.
Wingspan.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a version on Steam if you ever want to play with me.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. Why should neurodivergent people be included in our diversity efforts?
Oh my gosh. Do you want an hour-long monologue on that? Let me see. How can I make this quick? So neurodivergent people are up to 20% of the population. So if you have 5 people in your family, one of them is probably neurodivergent. And if you think of your extended family, maybe 10 of them are neurodivergent. And if you think of your workplace, depending on the size of your workplace, you already know tons of neurodivergent people. So you already know that we're capable of a lot, and we have a lot of strengths and talents to bring to the table. Um, and so we should be included because of what we bring. But also, I will say, as a human rights advocate, people deserve to be included regardless of what they can bring to the table.
Right.
Humans are humans. Humans have inherent worth and dignity. We are valuable regardless of what we can do or how productive we are or anything, how smart we are or how not smart we are. We are worth it. And so I really feel strongly that every single person deserves participation in society and access to resources in society, regardless of what they bring to the table. However, since I work for companies a lot doing DEI trainings and things, we always end up talking about productivity, right? So neurodivergent people tend to be deeper thinkers. We tend to be able to put together a lot of data and generate really good
Mm-hmm.
pictures of it. Many of us are faster thinkers. Some of us are not. Many of us are very creative and can come up with different ways of thinking about problems. All of that said, though, I just really feel like every single person deserves a place at the table, regardless of what we can do or not do. So that's going to be my that's going to be my quick answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're your friends and your family. Like, you know us. We're not like hiding somewhere. Maybe
Yeah.
we aren't diagnosed or out about it. A lot of us are kind of hidden, like I said, invisible. But you know us already. So we deserve to be at your tables.
Absolutely. That was like 2 or 3 minutes. Great job.
Woo! Not an hour at all. Okay. We're getting better.
There you go. What do you like to do for fun?
Oh my gosh. I am an autistic person, which means we do a thing called monotropism where we hyper focus basically on one thing at a time for a lot. So if I'm
Mhm.
in business mode or podcast generation mode or writing workshops for my Patreon people, I'm just in there doing that and having a great time. Neurodiversity really is my special interest, so I'm very lucky to be in the job I am. I also read a ton. I read a lot of neuroscience. I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction. I like board games. I like those psychological horror games. I like hanging out with my cats and kids, which I know is a boring white lady thing to say, but it's true. My
Yeah.
kids are the best kids, and my cats are really cute. Yeah, so nothing. I don't think I'm nobody who's going to jump out of parachutes or jump out of planes with a parachute or anything. I don't know that it is exciting, but I have plenty of things I love doing.
Yeah. Um, what is collaborative problem solving, and how can parents use it to improve their family's well-being?
Oh, I love this. It's like a fun pop quiz. Okay, so yeah, I teach collaborative parent problem solving for individual people as well as for parents. And collaborative problem solving is what it sounds like. It's all of us coming together to the table and trying to figure out solutions to an issue together, which means understanding the issue, laying out what it is, agreeing on what it is, and then generating solutions together. And a lot of parents, especially in the US, have sort of been trained that we're smarter and better and know more than our kids. And so we should just sort of tell them what to do. And there are cases like when they're about to run out into the road that we are smarter and know better, and we do want to tell them what to do. But in a lot of cases, parents block their kids from learning skills because they sort of oversolve or they pre-solve for them. So they know their kid is going to have a problem and they just sort of jump in front and fix it before the kid encounters the problem. And it's understandable why parents do this, but it stops kiddos from learning to problem solve on their own. And with neurodivergent kids, especially, they're going to go into a world where they need to be able to advocate for themselves and stand up for themselves and not be afraid to say, no, that's not going to work for me. So I strongly believe that we need to teach kids that skill and not block them. So collaborative problem solving is a process where we get into the practice of sitting at the table with our kids equitably and laying out the problem together and brainstorming solutions and deciding on solutions together. And what it does is it offloads the job of the parent a little bit, where we don't have to make decisions for everything all the time. And we don't have to do all this pre-solving and all this stressing about making our kids' lives seamless, right? They can have some seams, they can trip occasionally. We're still going to catch them if needed, but also they're probably going to be fine. So it helps reduce parent anxiety and overwhelm, and it helps kids learn skills in an age-appropriate, I don't want to say softer way, but supported way, where they're not just thrown out at college time with no skills and no practice problem solving and advocating for themselves. They already know how to do it. And I said college time, but it can be whenever, if ever your kids are independent. It can be when they're 30, 50, 80. They're still going to need those skills. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Plus, as a parent, if you're teaching them skills, they're learning the stuff with you there to help at that point and getting those skills built so they can use them later. That's a great way to do it. Yeah. How'd you come across that?
I was really looking for, a couple different ways. I think the primary place is that my youngest is a particular kind of personality. I think would have been traditionally called stubborn, but more like knows what they want and is kind of set on getting what they want. And when they were really little, like toddler, preschooler, we just had a lot of headbutting because I wanted to do it this way and they wanted to do it this way. And it was just like, and I was like, this is not how I want to parent. This is awful. Like nobody likes this. And so I was really looking for ways to improve communication initially, emotional intelligence and communication, again, at an age appropriate level for like a 3 or 4 year old. And so that ended up turning into okay, what communication skills can I learn as an adult? And collaborative problem solving is one of those communication skills that, it's often taught to like business owners or, people in the business world, but you can use it in families really well because it assumes equity. It assumes that everybody has a quality of experience through their lives, even your 4-year-old, that they've had some life experience and they know something about what they want and they know something about their needs. And if we can meet everyone's needs to the best of our ability, we're going to get a better resolution and there's going to be more buy-in and people are just going to walk away happier. So, so it really came out of parenting a quote unquote difficult child.
Yeah. I mean, I'm loving it. I wish I would have heard about this a long time ago because, the whole, like you're talking about how as a parent you go through the scenarios in your head and you kind of try to figure it out ahead of time. That's just a lot of energy and brain power used, and it sometimes doesn't end up going well anyway. So this seems like a better approach.
Yeah. Well, I did the same thing. I mean, I didn't start parenting with this idea. I noticed that I was spending so much energy trying to pre-solve. And then I was like, my kid isn't learning anything and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
How could we fix this? So,
yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
What is one tip you can share to help the listeners be more inclusive today? So just something simple that they can start today to be more inclusive.
Yeah, my go-to for this is always try to be open to people behaving oddly because I think one of the things that I see in my life, especially talking to other adult neurodivergent people, is often we need to stim to regulate ourselves, to stay calm, to be able to speak to you. and solve problems together. And regulating might look like we're tapping our leg or something, but it might look like hand flapping or bouncing on my Pilates ball or singing or, doing vocal trills. And people are going to do those. Having tics, right, is pretty common for autistics. There's lots of physical movement for most autistic people. And we get punished for that by society all the time. And people think we're dangerous, or people think we're going to, that we're irrational or going to do something violent just because we're trying to like regulate ourselves. And neurotypical people regulate themselves too, but we've sort of taught ourselves that regulation is safe, but other kinds of regulation are not safe. And so I just would really love it if more people could recognize their own internal process when they notice somebody behaving in a non-violent way, but abnormally. How about that? Like moving their body in a different way. To think to yourself, okay, am I thinking that's dangerous? Why do I think that's dangerous? What evidence do I have? Are they actually just like trying to chill out? Right. Is this my problem? And just like, let us be people in public spaces. Because so many of us don't go to public spaces because we're scared of being judged or having the police called on us just for being a human. And that's really dangerous for us, and other disabled people. So,
yeah, that's a great tip.
I'm glad.
Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't talked about? We've covered a lot of stuff.
We covered a ton. No, I'm great. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned a little bit in your introducing yourself, but do you just want to, one more time, just maybe share where the best place to connect with you?
Sure. Thank you. So I'm at Neurodiverging Coaching. My name is Danielle Sullivan, and you can find us at neurodiverging.com. I also run the Neurodiverging podcast, which is wherever you stream your podcasts, including this one, probably. So come check us out. We have a fun time.
Absolutely. Are you ready for the last question?
Absolutely.
Do you like spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
No.
No? That was quick.
Sorry. I've been a vegetarian for 20 years, and I never got a chance to try it before then. So if I ever become not a vegetarian, I'll try it then, though.
That's interesting. They should make a vegetarian version.
If they would make a veggie, like just for me to try, I would be on it in a hot second. I was in Philly for a long time, and spam is like so popular. It was impossible to avoid it, and I felt like I was missing out on so much Philadelphia cuisine.
That's interesting.
By being vegetarian.
Yeah, I live in Austin, Minnesota, where they make spam and where the spam museum is located. That's why I've been asking all of my guests just to see how it goes. Usually, it's like you. It's either a fast yes or a fast no. There's usually not a lot of pondering to decide it.
It's a polarizing meat. I would go to the spam museum in a hot second, though. I'll tell you what. So.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna go, it's in Austin, Minnesota. So if you end up coming, you let me know. We can.
Never up there. I'm totally going. That's great. I love that kind of stuff. That's right up my alley.
Yeah, I think in the paper I saw in January that last year they had like over 100,000 visitors come to it.
Wow.
So, that's amazing. The town's like 25,000, so it's a lot of people.
Wow, that's a lot of people. Big tourist attraction. That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah, thanks. To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episode. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.